Hello, everyone, and thank you for waiting and thank you for listening to Back Talk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine, the podcast talk show for parents. I'm Janice Robinson Celeste, your host and publisher of Successful Parenting Media. I want you to tell all of your friends and followers about the show. After all, sharing is caring. So know that our hashtag for the show is hashtag BackTalk. Please use it and let everybody know about us. Now, I want to tell you we have a special guest today. Her name is Leah Deshay, and we are discussing the Supreme Court overturning the Roe v. Wade law and 50-year precedent, which stripped 36 million childbearing people of their freedom to make their own decisions about their bodies, healthcare, and future. Now, Leah is a reproductive public health analyst and a parent/sex tech. So, Leah, you're muted, but unmute yourself and tell us exactly what that is and what it is you do.
Thanks so much for having me, Janice. So I started out as a reproductive healthcare provider who balanced doing patient care and research early in my career, which began about 16 years ago. And gradually along the way, I started to partake in a lot of endeavors for UX and UI, which is user experience, mostly for tech applications. My first experience with that was participating in the editing and template creation for the Epic system for one of our in and outpatient connection services documentation at one of the hospitals that I was working at, and found that I was really good at it and actually really enjoyed integrating real life experience and translating that into something that can be usable and trackable within the tech health industry. So within the last couple of years, I've just started combining my capacity to analyze research from the standpoint of an actual provider. A lot of researchers are all laboratory or all theoretical, and there's a certain advantage that comes with being able to bring real world experience into the analysis process. Not just an advantage, but it's really a necessity when it comes to being able to parse out inequities and the ability to create resolutions for them. Utilizing research to do that, you need to be able to bridge the gap between lived experience and where the research falls short in representing those of us who are oppressed. So between that and also my penchant for technology, I contribute some of that research analysis to a couple tech companies who I work for. And I also, I'm part of the advisory team for a Atlantic side UK health firm. So I'm all over the place. I'm doing my best to keep it together. Yeah.
But that's okay. You're right now broadcasting from Germany, and it's like 10 o'clock at night there, right? So I really appreciate it. Appreciate you coming here and doing this with us. Now, I just want to say to the audience who may be listening, if you're joining us now or even later, you can comment if you're on our Facebook page. Feel free to drop a line to us. And the earlier, the better. You put a question up or a comment, I can actually put it up on the screen. We can address it. So make sure you do that. And I have the Revolution Solution on YouTube. So she says, I am pro-life. So I'll be listening very close to what BW has to say. I am a Black women have to say. I'm a Black man from Atlanta. Nice to meet y'all. Carry on. Thank you for joining us. I don't know too many people who aren't pro-life. Most people are pro-life, but we'll be talking about that today. We're pro-life, but yet, people have a right to their bodies. So,
right.
Doesn't mean
pro-life,
you're not
but not pro-consent. And I think that's where the problem lies for too many. Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I consider myself a person who's pro-life, but I think people should have decisions about their body, be able to make that decision, because no one can really say when life actually begins. And if we're going to go by a heartbeat, then a lot of other things need to be in place in this world. Like, okay, can we get child support when this heartbeat starts? Can we?
Right.
Can I claim this heartbeat on my tax returns? No, I can't. And there's a reason why.
Can I drive in the carpool?
Can you talk about what?
So there's no confusion on all of those other issues.
Absolutely. Can you address that a little bit about this really isn't, in my viewpoint, I don't see it as a pro-life issue. I see it as a rights issue.
You're absolutely right. And I think, honestly, the greatest issue here is the separation of church and state, which unfortunately, and this is going to get into very sensitive territory. So I have to be completely transparent. I'm actually a PK. So I'm a pastor's kid. I come from 5 generations of extremely religious, very conservative relatives and family. However, I am not that way, and largely because of what I have watched and the levels of hypocrisy that many of us see when we grow up within that concentration of fundamentalism and politics and social life that can happen when you are within the evangelical global framework. I just saw too many contradictions to ever be comfortable with claiming it myself, and I know that that is something that puts people on edge. But I think the most, in a general sense, the best way to talk about this is that under no circumstances would anybody who considers themselves a devout, fill in the blank, any religion, want their rights to be stifled to practice their beliefs for themselves by the imposition of law of another religion to which they don't claim. So, the fascinating contradiction of wanting to have complete free will and free exercise of choice for yourself, and then wanting to take that and smother and stifle other people's capacity for their own, is, I think, we don't need to have any discussion beyond that problem, because the root of the problem comes in the lack of respect for other people's ability to choose. On a basic level, when I do talk to people for whom religion is a core part of their identity, they say religion, not spirituality, because this is a dogma problem. This is a rule problem, and how people perceive that, and also how they want to see it enforced. Is that if you, every single day of your life, are being given free choice to do or not do whatever it is you believe today or tomorrow or yesterday, what right do you have to remove that choice from other people? Whatever God that you believe in does not impose force upon you or anybody around you for the things that you were so committed to religiously. Where do you get off like as a not divine infallible being trying to impose something that the God that you believe does not even do? And so I think for me, if we keep it at that high level and that philosophical level, we don't need to get into the rest of the nitty gritty, because most of those descend into straw man arguments that, as you said, are irrelevant because it comes to a place of rights. The right to choose, the right to consent, the right to make your own decisions about what you do. Even if you believe that abortion is wrong, you probably also believe that stealing is wrong. But guess what? Everyday people get up and they have the choice about whether or not they're going to do it, right? People have the choice to cheat, they have the choice to lie, they have the choice to have multiple partners, all of these things which many people consider themselves to be very conservative. Like, ultimately, whether or not it bothers you in your mind has nothing to do with the impact that it has on that person's life, right? And their capacity to make that choice for themselves and what they believe is right. So fundamentally, when I'm talking to folks who have significantly different religious beliefs than I am, it's just like, how many of you want to live in a state that's controlled by Sharia law? If you already know the answer to that question, why are you doing the same thing that you claim to despise other people would be doing to you? Do you know what I mean? And like, if you can't answer that logically, then you already know that what you're doing is unfair. So for me,
Right.
that's pretty much where it ends, right?
Exactly. And I mean, I was raised Catholic, all my life in Catholic school for 10 years. And, we went through everything. We went through abortion, movies that were horrific for young people to see, like just gave you post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And usually they always showed it before lunch of all things. So I went through all of this. And yet we were taught God gives you free will, right? And let
Right.
you make your own choices about things.
Correct.
So, I mean, that's the fundamental bottom line to that. But here's the thing, and I see Tarot Destroyer, she is making a whole bunch of comments, which is great because we're going to address some of the population control things that you talked about there, and a few of your concerns. But when it comes to Black women specifically, to you, what does that mean? What does this overturning of Roe v. Wade mean for Black women?
Well, the origin of abortion bans come from the criminalization of transatlantic slave trade, not slavery, of transatlantic slave trade. So specifically the practice of capturing and kidnapping Africans from whatever country colonizers were invading at the time, putting them on ships, holding them hostage, and then keeping them captive in another country and forcing them to do labor for your profit, right? And so the actual trafficking process is what became illegal. At the time, we were a recently released colony of Britain, and Britain and the Netherlands, at the time Holland, were the ones who were basically, for the most part, in charge of the slave trade, a little bit of Spain left over. So when in Europe that was outlawed, the United States had still not outlawed slavery itself, and the only way to continue slavery was to force women to bear children by any man that was siring them. And I say any man because there were chattel slavery farms, like there were actual plantations where the sole purpose was to find what were considered the most buxom, childbearing, appearing, hefty, hearty, or whatever other awful sugar-coated versions of words and labels were made for women who were being forced to bear children to the maximum extent, including dying in childbirth and fistulas and, your uterus falling out because of all of these other things. So it didn't matter if it was another enslaved man or if it was your captor who was holding you hostage. Your only purpose was incubation in order to create additional laborers, because that's how our offspring were seen, regardless of who their patronage was, regardless of who the father was. So for me, when we look at the origin of abortion bans, what people need to understand is that there is no side of reproductive control that is acceptable. So in other words, forced sterilization is horror, like that's torture and it's inhumane. And so is forced birth. Like there isn't a side of it that is just, and it goes back to choice. And all of those things have been utilized at different points or another within Black American, like North American history and Caribbean history. There isn't any type of reproductive control that has not been utilized against us and has cost us massive amounts of life to the point of genocide. So to me, you just have to keep coming back to choice. The point is, if you were not in control over what happens to your body and what part you get to play and at what point you get to play it in having descendants or giving birth or being pregnant, then you were being utilized as a tool for someone else's exploit. Do you know what I mean? And it doesn't matter whether you're being forced sterilized or whether you're forced birth or whether you're forced breastfeeding or whether you're forced, giving your kid up for adoption. None of those things matter. The only thing that is collective that is the problem is force, right? So that's my basic answer to that question.
Right. Well, let me just address a couple of things because we have some pro-lifers that are in here. So I want to just kind of address that. Some of these, I'm going to put it up here for a second. Revolution solution. You can have all of those choices. There's now a consequence of a law accompanying that choice. So stay blessed. Thank you for the blessings. And I'm glad we can discuss this in a civilized manner. So thank you for that. But here's the thing. There were laws that were put in place that are inhumane. And they're
Correct.
still on the books. That doesn't make it right.
Slavery was also a law. Like, why are we justifying a law as if a law equals a moral imperative? That is not how things are calculated.
It definitely doesn't. No. Interracial marriage was illegal.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
We have things that are legal.
Drinking from the same water fountain of the people who lynched your grandfather was considered illegal. Like, this is not this is not a measure of morality. In fact, sometimes it's evidence of the opposite. It's just a measure of who's in power and who gets to punish you. Right. That's it.
It's control. Now, some things we know we do have to control, like murder, like shooting somebody blatantly, that's, things like that. But, this is when it involves someone else, you are now oppressing that person. Okay. Correct. And if whether or not you believe it's a child in the belly or not, it's another person involved that has the right and the consciousness to make decisions. But she also made another comment that abortion is being used as contraception. And if it is, that's a sick person, because the people I know who've had an abortion, it affects them for the rest of their lives. It's not an easy decision to make. It really tears people apart. So I would consider someone who would use it as contraception as far with somebody who is a psychopath or sociopath. No, I don't know anyone who could do that. But can you comment on some of these different?
Well, some of these comments are lacking any basis in biology. So as a clinical provider, for me, I have to start there. It'll take a lot for me to explain it in detail, but contraception is literally, it means that it bars the capacity for conception. So if conception has already occurred, you cannot be contracepting something. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that's like saying, like, this bicycle's being used as a dryer. Well, like, ma'am, clothes don't fit in it and it doesn't dry clothes. Like it just doesn't work. And so for me, it's difficult to have these conversations as someone who works in medicine and works in the research side and considers myself a scientist for the last 16 years, because not unintentionally, this country has gone through great lengths to completely numb and dumb down every level of education they possibly can, so that people lack the capacity to understand and critically think about topics like this, and are left only to have discussions based on the propaganda that they've been fed, the things that they've heard from others who have power but also don't have any education. Yes, I am talking about church. So, and their feelings that are created based upon the exposure that they have to the media and the influences around them, which is, again, what you were talking about, what you were exposed to at different points in your life, especially early on. You're very impressionable, and the way that you're being exposed to it, the impression that's left is one of heavy trauma or heavy emotional reactivity, versus actually having facts upon which to make a decision. And this is not limited. This is not something that's limited to abortion. This is a problem with gun laws, right? Like, this is a problem with so many other things. It's just generally a tactic that is used by those in power in the country in order to muddy the water, so that even when people do have a choice, they don't have the resources, the educational resources with which to make a choice that's appropriate for them. And then you're left to rely upon information given to you by other people who also have power, perhaps more than they should, such as doctors and nurses. Normally, even as somebody who is, a colleague and a provider, you should be able to trust those people, but we all know that they also bring their biases with them to work. And so when you combine all of those experiences, many people are left just with alarmism and whatever they believe they've seen from the periphery of their loved ones' lives, without any necessary details or full understanding of what's happening. So abortion can't be used as contraception, because contraception, literally the purpose of it is to bar conception from happening. So once conception has happened, we're moving into something else. This is why people say abortion is health care, because anything that is happening to you once you have conceived is a healthcare activity. Like, it's something that you have to talk to a doctor about, right? If you're going to do safely, you have to get some level of medical surveillance or approval. It has to involve another clinical person, right? And so, like, you can do an abortion by yourself, but you'll most likely die. You will most likely die, and usually a terrible death, which is the whole entire purpose of this. There is no contraception you can do by yourself in your own home. Nobody has to know. Nobody's involved. Your doctor can give you a prescription, but they have no idea. Do you take all of them at once? Do you take them at the same time every day? Do you throw them in a Russian roulette and just pick one out whenever you feel like it? They have no idea. And that is a completely different interaction with your body, where you were trying to keep something from happening, versus now you were trying to see what are your options to create an alternative outcome once conception has already happened. I don't know if that makes sense. And so once we're on the other side of that involves medical assistance. You cannot do it alone unless you're trying to commit suicide. And so the fact that I understand as a Black woman completely why there would be no impulse to trust medical providers, right, in order to help you with that decision. And I think that is historically and presently a very valid reaction. So we live in this space where we have to sort of level with the contradictions, right? Like, theoretically, I can tell you, this is a healthcare choice that should be made with a trusted provider. And you might hear that and go, okay, but as a Black woman, I've never met a provider that I've trusted. And both of those things are true. You know what I mean? And so we have so many other levels of stressors that have to be involved in our decisions. But the problem is taking out the capacity to make the choice and the capacity to find a provider you trust is not improving our mortality rates. It's actually going to make them significantly worse, because we have the highest risks and the least amount of positive outcome whenever it comes to treatment. That does not get improved when you remove the medical system. Yes, it is a completely imperfect medical system, but it doesn't become more perfect by being less available, So it's just,
right.
There's no way that you can look at it where this is going to improve outcomes. It's not going to improve outcomes, as it is with the best medical care in the world. And, providers, we have some of the highest level of Black access to providers in the world, which is sad because it's not enough. So if we're in the country where you're most likely to find, even though it's not enough, someone who looks like you or understands you or isn't white and perhaps is less racist than a white provider, and you're still, even with all the access to that technology, have a high likelihood of mortality because of weathering, because of lack of whatever person at the front counter doesn't believe you. Like maybe the doctor is wonderful, but the person who's going to sign you in won't call the doctor because they don't believe you. There's so many steps that could be happening that are barring people from getting help because of residual racism that's left in the system. Throwing away the system, unfortunately, does not improve our outcomes. And I think that's the place where people have a hard time grasping how this could actually make things worse. Do you know what I mean? Like unless you've
yes,
seen
we
it,
can.
it's hard to understand that this is not an improvement. But that's all I
Absolutely.
can
Now,
offer.
I just want to play a clip really quickly. I have two clips from this wonderful woman. She's a TikToker, but she's called Your Rich BFF, and she usually gives economic advice and financial advice, right?
Sure.
But she spoke about the whole economics of preventing abortions. And I just want to
Yeah.
kind of play what she has to say. So let's talk about that a little bit, but I'm going to play it.
Surprise! Welcome to America. Abortion is all about money. Abortion access isn't just about bodily autonomy, but it's also about economic security and opportunity. Legal access to abortion increases women's probability of graduating college by 72%. Delaying motherhood by 1 year due to access to legal abortion increases women's wages by 11%. And on top of that, legal abortion decreases the percentage of children who grow up in poverty and improves future life outcomes, including college attendance rates. Legal abortion helps women and our society overall become more educated, higher earners in better financial positions. But let me be clear, the same people who stacked the SCOTUS bench do not want this for their communities. They want babies born into poverty. They want single mothers to struggle to support their children. Why? Because it keeps the working class working. The same legislators that are adamantly pro-life also hail from states with the highest poverty rates and the lowest literacy rates. So don't tell me this is about life. This is about keeping people paycheck to paycheck so that they have to work until they die. I'm mad. You should be too. You can fight back by donating and voting.
So that's just one of her videos. And I thought she hit a lot of good points. And I just wanted to know what you thought about that.
She's right. I don't like the best thing I can say for that is that if you and I can talk after the show in the next couple of days, I'm a big fan of making resource pages. Like, I'm a child of the 80s. So I grew up with reading Rainbow, and I used to love when LeVar Burton would say, "But don't take my word for it," and like send you to the library and make you look it up yourself. So that's really my response. Like, she's correct. Don't take my word for it, and don't take her word for it. By all means, like, let's create a resource page where people can go look these things up themselves, because I fundamentally believe that one of the most important parts of consent is informed choice, and your capacity not only to have access to the correct information, but to be able to feel confident in verifying the sources of those information yourself. As somebody who is a research analyst, I literally don't have anything to add. I loved how concisely she, presented that information. I know so many of us in this field, we struggle because we're so passionate about it. So we're adding other information that's also important, but that was just a lovely packaged little snippet. But all of those facts and those discoveries are things that came out of decades and decades of research, not just within the United States, but globally, comparing to other westernized countries that have had significantly more abortion and abortion protection and contraception accessibility. Here's the other thing, and if there's anything that I want someone to take away, even if for some reason you're not bothered by or triggered or concerned about the reversal of this hearing, go look at the comments about what they are about to do next and ask yourself how you can justify the plans that they have to roll back the remaining amendments that were created and passed specifically to protect a broad spectrum of civil rights. If this was the gateway or the opening of Pandora's box to allow them to significantly reduce all of the protections that in my generation we came to hold as sacred, how can you explain the need for them to continue doing the rest of those things, which it doesn't take a rocket scientist or an economist to know that if you reduce abortion and you eliminate access to contraception, we're going to be in squalor. And that's not magic. You don't need to be good at math. Like, that's just very, very basic logic to go, hold on. So you're saying that there's no way for us to prevent, control, or otherwise family plan any sort of pregnancy. And when you get pregnant, even your medical provider is not allowed to help you with your specific physical, mental, social, whatever dependency, because you don't know what people are dealing with. You're looking at somebody saying you've gotten an abortion. For all you know, this person is, had a drug issue and they're wearing a methamphetamine patch, and they know that it's better if they don't have a baby, and none of those things are your business. Like, all of that should be something that's private, that they discuss with their provider. They don't need to be questioned by you or justified by you or any of those things. We literally, from person to person, have no idea what people's reasons are, and we don't need to. That's the point. But if we can't even prevent pregnancy, if that's the next move, then you have to ask yourself, where is this coming from? And to me, that brings it right back to the original. They need a massively desperate teeming group of people to work for them. The one thing I'll add that she didn't put in there is that as our birth rates fall, the working class power to negotiate rises significantly, because there's so much less competition for all of these positions. So now companies can't be like, well, if you won't take this $5 an hour to do like an administrative secretary's work, somebody's desperate enough to, because everybody who was brought here was loved, was planned, was educated, was provided for, was brought up in a family where desperation, was not the state of mind because their parents weren't forced to have a baby they didn't plan on when the condom broke, or things like that. So you have a population that no longer can be as manipulated, and that is not something that behooves a class of billionaires and politicians and pundits whose only thought is to control us for mass exploitation. And that mindset is what this country was founded on when, all of the natives were wiped out and slaves were brought in to do work that they couldn't be bothered to, while they took all of the profit from it. Like, this isn't an accident, and it isn't new. And I feel like they're being so forthright about the origin of their plans that it puzzles me that anyone can't see that. And so when people are talking about population control, yes, but population control is not merely reducing it. Population control is population control. It is manipulating it into whatever size, shape, form, and desperate state of mind is necessary in order for you to exploit to maximum profit for yourself. That's population control. It is not something that is unidirectional. It goes any direction that the person who is in power feels they are going to profit from on the maximum level. Does that make sense? And so in this situation, we've gone to a place where they no longer can convince us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and to steal bread from your neighbor in order to make it to work this morning without starving. We're no longer in those feudal situations, and they're really tired of negotiating with us. So the only thing they can do is put us back into a place where we are operating on the most basic fundamental levels and no longer can organize because we barely can survive. So to me, that's the message that she's trying to get people to. And if there's anything I need people to see, regardless of what their religious beliefs are, if you were concerned about those things happening, it is happening, right? It doesn't need to happen the way that you're familiar with or that you were taught was going to happen for it to be happening.
Right. I have Rochelle here, and she's saying the same thing. She's agreeing, saying they want to create a permanent underclass because not enough people are having kids.
That's
and
right.
We have to look at both sides of this. So then I have, of course, which is not what I was taught in school, but I don't agree with. Abortion is murder, from Be Catholic or Be Lost. I like that name. It's interesting. However, I got to say this. You have two, if you want to call it a person, because you're Catholic or, have this strong belief, you have then two people involved. So what about the other person? Right. And they're right. So there are
and the
times
other person
when women
is the primary person, like the baby does not survive without that person. So like I for me, as somebody who's Jewish, we see it as the complete opposite. Like the baby, until it can survive on its own and take its own breath, is an extension of the mother. Can it survive alone? Because if it can, then save it. And if it can't, then we know who our primary concern is. And that is the person supporting both lives, which is the one individual who's bearing the child, right? And so this is why I said before, we can't descend into religious argumentation about like, what is the origin of life? And you mentioned that that's going to get us absolutely nowhere. Like And that's also not a way to convert people to to my beliefs. Like, the point is, I don't want Catholics making rules for Jews, and I don't want Jews making rules for Muslims. You know what I'm saying? I don't want Buddhists making rules for Hindus. That is the point, right? Everybody should
religion
be
and
able
government
to,
are supposed to be
correct,
separate. Yeah.
correct. And so when abortion is a protected option, it stops no one from practicing their religious beliefs and not getting one. Absolutely no one is forced to get an abortion when abortion is accessible. Nobody. Like, yes, in the past there was mass sterilization, but those things were genocidal acts. Like, it's not like you can go to the doctor and you tell the doctor, oh, I'm having like stomach pains, and they're going to give you an abortion pill. Like, this is not the scenario in the modern world of what's happening, right? And so if abortion is accessible, everybody can exercise their rights and their religious beliefs. Everybody who's religious can have every baby that they ever conceive, and everybody who isn't cannot. But once we're restricting it, now you were imposing one group's belief on everyone, and that is so unjust. Like, there's nobody in that group who would want the tables flipped and for a different group to be imposed upon them. And that basis alone, every time I mention that to somebody who says this, they never can respond to me. So I'm like, you're wrong. You know what I'm saying? just come down to fundamental respect for everybody else's choice. Like, literally do unto others what you would have them do unto you, which is allow you to exercise your own beliefs. And if you want other people to be responsible for them, then let them be. Let them be responsible to their doctor. Let them be responsible to God. If God is your concern, then leave them to God. The law is not God. And as Black people, nobody should know that better than we do. Absolutely no one, right?
Right. No, good points. I just want to touch on this really quickly because, like I said, there are two lives involved, and the mother, there are times when the mother will lose her life and the child will lose their life. And now, because she can't make the choice to abort the baby, it's government sanctioned murder, in my opinion.
That's right.
So I just want to make that point. And the other points I want to make is that I looked up a statistic, and it said that Black women have or I should say Black childbearing people have the most abortions, and they have the higher statistics, right? And I'm not sure if that's 100% true, but that's what I read. And I need to look into it a little bit further.
It depends on how you have to look at it a little. It depends on, abortion means any time a pregnancy is stopped. And that includes miscarriages. And it also includes necessary medical procedures. And so this is where things get dicey with like bad reporting, right? And so having an abortion, having an imposed abortion, an abortion where the pregnancy is not threatened and there's not a viability issue and there is not an inborn condition in the mother that is threatening, the entire condition of both people, having a medical abortion by choice that you go to a provider for reasons that are not related to immediate external threat. What I've seen is that the rates are actually the highest among white women. However, abortion where it's included in the medical categorization of it, which is literally any pregnancy that does not go to term. So regardless of if it's miscarriage or anything else, yes, Black women are higher. But that is because due to the effects of racism and weathering and stress and everything else in our system and lack of time appropriate treatment, for other things like endometriosis and, PPMD and all of these other things, we are the most likely to have complications that lead to either a need for an abortion or a natural abortion, as some people like to call it, which is your body miscarrying or, anything else that your body does because it can no longer sustain the pregnancy. Does that make sense? So it's it's not as clear as it should be. And honestly, as a statistician, I'd have to sit down, even like every time I look up these rates, I have to look up the source of them and also the methodology within which they were counted, because there are some people publishing some things and you look into the numbers and you're like, how did you get that? You excluded an entire neighborhood or, whatever else is going on.
I totally get that. I just want to play one more of your rich BFF on TikTok's opinion about abortion, because I just enjoy her. Okay, so let me do that.
Some of y'all do not understand the basic economics behind abortion, but I went to U Chicago and I do, so I'll explain. The SCOTUS decision to strike down Roe v. Wade is not going to end abortion, it's going to end safe, legal, accessible abortion. Let's focus on one of the most conservative states as an example, Texas. Before the ruling, it was already expensive to get a surgical abortion in Texas, $1,000 to $4,000. And now that people are going to have to factor in travel costs, lodging, and time off work, the only people that can afford this are senators, mistresses, and the Texan elite. But in economics, there is an unusual phenomenon called Giffen goods. Certain items, when the price goes up, people actually buy more of it, not less. For example, high inflation, you go to the grocery store, all the prices have gone up, but because people can't afford premium items like meats and cheeses, they buy lower quality items like rice and bread instead, even though the price of those has gone up as well. In this case, safe abortions are the meats and cheeses. Unsafe, unsupervised abortions are going to be the Giffen goods that people opt for, even if it costs them more, both from a money and safety perspective. This ruling is a death sentence for poor people.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because more than half of America's Black population lives in the South, where women of color make up a significant part of that population. So can you comment on that?
I mean, once again, she's correct. I love her too. And the reason why I love her is because she concisely presents accurate information in a way that's easy for people to access, right? The only additional comment I would have is that I don't know if you saw this video. So many people have seen it by now. And I don't even remember her name, probably because I despise what she represents. But whatever pundit was with ex-president treasonous Trump today, because that's what I like to call him, where she said, this is a victory for white life. This is what she meant. Like everything that's being done, everything that's being done right now, including what was it, about 3 weeks ago, the governor of Mississippi made this godforsaken, just Klan marinated comment. Somebody asked him how he could justify / ignore the horrible maternal child health outcome rates in Mississippi. And this man said, and I quote, "If you correct them for race." We can stop right there. Right?
I remember that. I remember hearing that from his mouth.
But if you correct them for race, comma, and then he continued, and you don't count the outcomes of Black women, we're really doing just fine. Listen, people, they know that we are going to suffer the most. So the fact that we won't accept that we are suffering the most is basically it's committing us to martyrdom. They're not confused about the fact that that white women and anybody who is, party to a cis privileged white male elite individual of any sort are still going to be able to get whatever healthcare they want whenever they need it, and nobody's going to talk about it just like they do now. They're going to pretend it doesn't happen because they believe they're entitled to do whatever they want to with their own bodies. They never interfered with their own consent, right? The whole concept is enforcing and removing consent from other people who they perceive to be tools towards their own gain. And in this situation, that would be us. So if they're being extremely open about knowing the horrifying, the extension of genocidal effect that this is going to have and worsening all of our reproductive outcomes, it beguiles me why we won't accept. It's not. They've said the quiet part so out loud. Believe them.
They've said it out loud repeatedly. Let me tell you something.
Yes.
So population control, right? The browning of America. If you guys don't know what that is, the browning of America, please go look. And I've been hearing the right talk about it. Replacement theory. It's all part of it. Yeah. All this is part of the fear of the browning of America, which includes South Asians that are anyone that's basically dark,
anybody brown,
Muslim,
us. Brown people.
It doesn't matter. The fear that the statistics are showing that by 2050, for sure, we will be the majority, right? And white people will be the minority. The fear that I believe they have, and this is my opinion, people, is that they fear that we're going to treat them as they have treated minorities throughout history.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not the case because we don't care. Honestly, we just want to get our equity, right? We really don't care about
that
much.
Just want them to leave us alone. That's
Thank you. So whoever tells you this crap,
and they're very lucky.
Anybody.
They're very lucky.
It's a lucky situation because we could be really mad about it, but we're not. We're like, yo, just give us our whatever we deserve.
I won't say that. I am mad about it. I am mad about it, but I come from a haughty place where it's I'm never going to be as bad as you are. My place is low key from a bit of snubbing. I'm going to get
when you look into the history of it, yes. Right. I will take that back a bit because I just watched the show where they showed shackles for slave children aged 3 to 4, and it ticked me off. I ain't gonna lie. So yes, I have anger issues, but not to take it out on you today. You go do your thing, leave me alone, Yes, I'm mad about the history, but it's nothing I can do about that at that point, but just move on and be the best I can be, live my best life.
Correct.
But I don't want anybody interfering with that. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. So here we are. We got, okay, white women, they're having abortions, but so legislation says, okay, we need to increase our population. What do? We control birth control. We make sure that you can't get abortion, so you have more kids, so your population gets up. Because Black and brown people are going to have babies. We're going to have lots of them too. The maternal mortality rate, we don't do anything much about that.
It will get worse, but it will get worse because what's going to happen is, we raise all of these alarms about maternal mortality rate, but then nobody did anything to improve it. So they're doing the math and they're saying that if the maternal mortality rates are such that 4 times as many Black women and 2 times as many Hispanic women are dying in childbirth, if we increase everybody's birth rates, you're going to keep dying at those rates and potentially higher rates because now there will be more stress in the system. There won't be any additional providers, right? Like, this is me understanding the background of the situation. So it's going to be the same amount of providers, significant amount of far poorer, far more stressed out, needy patient populations. So they're going to get worse care. They're going to seek it later, usually too late, and they're not giving us any healthcare provisions. We have absolutely no maternal child health leave after birth. We have zero net of safety. So they know that the only people who are even going to afford to be able to survive are white, and that's what they're banking on. So people who are concerned about population control, you should be, but you should also know that this is also population control. This is not in your favor.
In addition to that, we have
situation, right?
Right. We also have the highest infant mortality rate as well.
Correct.
So you can add that in there. This all starts to you can piece it together. It's not conspiracy theory. Right. It's statistics. You can see it, and it's a big issue, and it's a big problem, and we've been trying to address it in different ways. So here we are now. What happens next? What happens next? What do we do?
I feel like a hypocrite when people ask me this question because I'm on the other side of the world right now. I'm just being transparent. Me and quite a few other people, I'm sure you were one of them. It's not as if it's not a rare thing that anybody who was not white saw this coming. I would say for me, the outcome or lack of outcome of Ferguson, watching so many of the Black men who were in the forefront of that civil rights movement be assassinated was the first bell for me, and nobody doing anything about it. And at this point,
I've heard that bell too. Yes.
That was almost a decade ago. It doesn't feel, well, to some people it doesn't feel like, it feels like 20 years to me. But watching that happen was letting me know, oh, they really don't care. They don't care that we know that they don't care. This is a terribly dangerous situation, right? And so everything that's happened after that has just been descent into chaos at a certain level, statistically, politically, and otherwise. Or perhaps ascent into realizing how fake this idea of post-racialism, you could say both those things are true, honestly. In terms of what happens next, I don't have any positive reflections because one of the best ways for us to understand what it's going to take to change the future is looking at what it has taken to change the past. And in the past, the United States has never made a peaceful transition into progress. Not ever. Not ever. There are certain people among us who would claim that the civil rights movement was as close as it got. But for who? For the white people who were watching Black and Chicanos people get beat down on television? You know what I mean? To those who were watching Kent State and weren't getting shot and were just realizing, oh, well, that would never be me. To pretend that just because there was not a formal war during the Jim Crow era to the end of the civil rights movement is to completely, from where I stand, dishonor the ancestors, so many of them who lost their lives, many of them in nameless graves that we'll never know about because we still have no idea how many people were lynched in that time from 1919 to 1970. And really beyond that, we don't know. So whatever's going to happen in the future, I think we have to get to a place where we can unite on certain principles, which is why, when we're talking about something that I love in this conversation is basic human rights trump the ability for me to try and coerce other people into my personal religious beliefs, right? We really need to get to a place as people where we're looking at the UN, what is the definition of genocide? Those are our priorities, and taking this concept of, I believe this, which is fine, that's fine. Stop it there. We can't extend it to, so you have to believe it. And if you don't, it's not fine, right? Like the idea of fundamental human rights and civil rights that need to be protected not only transcends religion, but really requires the diversity of religion to be respected in order for civil rights to be real and for it to exist. You know, unity is this concept of looking at our diversity and acknowledging that it contributes to our strength, whereas uniformity is trying to erase diversity in order to create this false concept of like of supremacy, more or less, because you have to choose one that's going to be at the top. And if there's a takeaway I want people to realize is that a lot of us who were descending from these colonial religions, whether we know it or not, this idea of supremacy is so subconsciously ingrained into our thought process that we don't realize that that's what we're actually imposing into conversations such as these, when we want to take our religious beliefs and make them the primary concern instead of literally the capacity for the person to be alive and to choose how to be alive regardless of what they believe. Do you know what I mean? Like the idea that there can only be one supreme belief and that it supersedes other people's capacity to exist is very, very white. So if you, as a person of color, if that is a defining part of your religion, you need to look at what you're worshiping. You know what I'm saying? And step back. To me, when you look at world religions and you take away the colonial aspects of them, which is hard, most of the prophets and the divinities of these religions agree on this fact. There are no religions that fundamentally in their sacred texts deny the right of free choice. So once we look at that and we protect all of our capacity to determine our own lives, right, and to protect each other's ability to exist in happiness and in safety and in health, first and foremost, we're going to have to get there. And once we get there, we can stand up to this alternative concept of white is right, and everything that is associated with whiteness is the only thing that can be legislated, right, and punished or protected. So for me, we really have to get to those basics levels and be able to unite, and then from there figure out how we're going to do this. You know, is it going to be civil disobedience? Is it going to be civil war? Whatever it's going to be, we're not going to be able to triumph unless we can reject this concept of taking colonial beliefs as the master's superior priority and having all of our existence and our coexistence be the priority. I don't know if that makes sense. It might be a little philosophical.
It does make some sense, but we're running out of time, so I just want to address everything. I want to thank you for coming on the show all the way from Germany late at night to talk to me and our audience about this. And if anything changes, I would love to bring you back because I could talk to you literally all day about this. And I wish I had more time to address all the questions for the pro-lifers there, as well as everyone else who joined us who might be on the fence or on the other side of the fence. I will go back when I have time and address all of these comments on YouTube and on Facebook because I do have an answer for you. For everyone who wrote something, I have an answer for you. You can best believe that. You might not agree, but it's okay. We might not agree, but it's okay not to agree as long as we're civil, right? As long as we're civil and we can talk to one another. And that's what I'm all about. We should be able to discuss things as we do learn from each other if you have an open mind, right? So, it's no one wants to see anything die. I wouldn't want to see me die. I don't want to see my baby die. I don't want to see anybody die if I can help it. You know what I mean? But then sometimes you get forced into a corner for a decision to be made, and people have to make a decision. And you should be able to make that decision with your provider. And it's not I don't care what anybody says, that cannot be an easy decision. And if it is, something's wrong with that person. I just want to say for the pro-lifers, the staunch pro-lifers out there, I get what you've been told, everything, but do me a favor, okay? Be pro-birth too. So after these babies are born, you need to have pro-life then too, for the guns that they're shooting up your kids with, for everything.
Not pro-pregnancy.
Right. Be pro-life all the way to the end, from the cradle to the grave. You can't just stop and be like
Security, pro-life
all the way. If you're gonna do it right.
Pro Black Lives Matter, be pro everything, or else this is not actually what you're going for.
But that's what we need. If you're gonna do that, go for that. But don't you can't just stop or pick and choose. But anyway, I want to thank you. I'm going to close out the show. But thank you all for participating and listening to Back Talk. by Successful Black Parenting Magazine, the videocast and syndicated podcast talk show for parents. Now, don't forget to follow us too on Twitter and Facebook. We're at Black Parenting One because we were the first Black parenting magazine nationally. And we're also on Instagram as Successful Black Parenting. Again, our website is successfulblackparenting.com, and it's full of great content to help parents of Black children to thrive and not just survive as a parent. Now, be sure to rate our podcast. And until next time, I wish you all the best and much success. Take care.